He got schizophrenia, he got cancer, and then he got cured. A bone marrow transplant. Treated a patient's leukemia and his delusions too. Some doctors think they know why. By Moses Velasquez Menoff, a science writer. September 29, 2018. I don't know why it's showing that when it's October 3rd. Like that picture. Jesse Jacobs. Is that the artist? Funky image. Oh, it is the artist. I'm gonna look up their artwork. Oh, interesting. The man was 23 when the delusions came on. He became convinced that his thoughts were leaking out of his head and that other people could hear them. When he watched television, he thought the actors were signaling him, trying to communicate. He became irritable and anxious and couldn't sleep. Dr. Tsuyoshi Mayaoka, as physiatrist, treating him at the Seimei University School of Medicine, Japan, eventually diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia. He then proceeded a series of antipsychotic drugs. None helped. The man's symptoms were, in medical parlance, treatment resistant. A year later, the man's condition worsened. He developed fatigue, fever, and shortness of breath, and turned out he had a cancer of the blood called acute myeloid leukemia. My grandfather had lymphatic blood cancer and died of it. More so, he died of the morphine they overdosed him on and the radiation from the chemotherapy. He had, radiation therapy, morphine, and chemo. But I view chemo as a form of poison, like radiation. He'd need a bone marrow transplant to survive. After the procedure came the miracle. The man's delusions and paranoia almost completely disappeared. His schizophrenia seemingly vanished. Years later, he is completely off all medication and shows no physiatric symptoms. Dr. Mayaoka told me in an email somehow the transplant cured the man's schizophrenia. A bone marrow transplant essentially reboots the immune system. Chemotherapy kills off your old white blood cells. Well, chemotherapy kills all your cells, your good cells, your bad cells. That's why most people die from it. But anyway, the new one sprout from the doctor's transplanted blood stem cells. It's unwise to extrapolate too much from a single case study, and it's possible it was the drugs the man took as part of the transplant procedure that helped him, but his recovery suggests that his immune system was somehow driving his physiatric systems. First glance, the idea seems bizarre. What does the immune system have to do with the brain? What it jibes with a growing body of literature suggesting that the immune system is involved in physiatric disorders, from depression to bipolar disorder. The theory has a long, if somewhat overlooked, history. In the late 19th century, physicians noticed that when infections tore through physiatric wards, the resulting fever seemed to cause an improvement in some mentally ill and even catatonic patients. Inspired by these observations, the Austrian physician Julius Wagner developed a method of deliberate infection of physiatric patients with malaria to induce fever. Some of his patients died from the treatment, but many others recovered. He won a Nobel Prize in 1927. One much more recent case study relates how a woman's psychotic symptoms, she had schizoaffective disorder, which combines symptoms of schizophrenia and a mood disorder, such as depression, were gone after severe infection with high fever. Modern doctors have also observed that people who suffer from certain autoimmune diseases, I have that, like lupus, I swear I've scalp lupus, have developed what looks like physiatric illness. Don't surprise me. These symptoms probably result from the immune system attacking the central nervous system, or from a more generalized inflammation that affects how the brain works. Indeed, in the past 15 years or so, a new field has emerged called autoimmune neurology. Some 24 autoimmune diseases of the brain and nervous system have been described. The known is probably anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. Encephalitis. Yeah, I think that's the autoimmune disease where your body attacks your brain. I'm right. Made famous by Susanna Allen's memoir Brain on Fire. These disorders can resemble bipolar disorder, epilepsy, even dementia, and that's often how they're diagnosed initially, but when prompted, treated with powerful immune suppressing therapies, what looks like dementia often reverses. Psychosis evaporates. Epilepsy stops. Patients who just a decade ago might have been I say it so bad. Institutionalized or even die, get better, and go home. Admittedly, the diseases are exceedingly rare, but their existence suggests there could be other immune disorders of the brain and nervous system we don't know about yet. Dr. Robert Yolkin, a professor of developmental neurovirology at Johns Hopkins, estimates that about a third of schizophrenia patients show some evidence of immune disturbance. The role of immune activation in serious physiatric disorders is probably the most interesting new thing to know about the disorders, he told me. Studies on the role of genes in schizophrenia also suggest immune involvement, a finding that for Dr. Yolkin helps to resolve an old puzzle. People with schizophrenia tend not to have many children. Maybe that's why I don't have any kids. So how the genes that increase the risk of schizophrenia, assuming they exist, persistent in populations over time. One possibility is that we retain genes that might increase the risk of schizophrenia because those genes helped humans fight off pathogens in the past. Some physiatric illness may be an inadvertent consequence and part of having an aggressive immune system, which brings us back to Dr. Mayaoka's patient. There are other possible explanations for his recovery. Dr. Andrew McKeon, a neurologist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Maine, a center of autoimmune neurology, points out that he could have suffered from a condition called paraneoplastic syndrome. That's when a cancer patient's immune system attacks a tumor. In this case, the leukemia. But because some molecule in the central nervous system happens to resemble one on the tumor, the immune system also attacks the brain, causing physiatric or neurological problems. This condition was important historically because it pushed researchers to consider the immune system as a cause of neurological and physiatric symptoms. Eventually, they discovered that the immune system alone, unprompted by malignancy, could cause physiatric symptoms. Another case study from the Netherlands highlights the still mysterious relationship. In this study, on which Dr. Yolkin is a co-author, a man with leukemia received a bone marrow transplant from a schizophrenic brother. He beat the cancer but developed schizophrenia. Once he had the same immune system, he developed similar physiatric symptoms. The bigger question is this: if so many syndromes can produce schizophrenia-like symptoms, should we examine more closely the entity we called schizophrenia? Some physiatrists long ago posted that schizophrenia has existed. Different paths that led to what looked like one disorder. Perhaps one of those paths is auto-inflammatory or autoimmune. If this idea pans out, what can we do about it? Bone marrow transplant is this extreme and risky intervention, and even if the theoretical basis were completely sound, which it's not yet, it's unlikely to become a widespread treatment for physiatric disorders. Dr. Yolkin says that for now, doctors treating leukemia patients who also have physiatric illnesses should monitor their physiatric process after transplantation so that we can learn more. And there might be other softer interventions. A decade ago, Dr. Mayaoka accidentally discovered one. He treated two schizophrenia patients who were both institutionalized and practically catatonic with minoxidil, an old antibiotic usually used for acne. Both completely normalized on the antibiotic. Dr. Mayaoka stopped it. Their psychosis returned, so he'd prescribe the patients a low dose on a continued basis and discharge them. Minoxidil has since been studied by others. Larger trials suggest that it's an effective add-on treatment for schizophrenia. Some have argued that it works because it tamps down inflammation in the brain, but it's also possible that it affects the microbiome, the community of microbes in the human body, and thus changes how the immune system works. Dr. Yolkin and colleagues recently explored this idea with a different tool, probiotics microbes thought to improve immune function. He focused on patients with mania, which has a relatively clear immunological signal. During manic episodes, many patients have elevated levels of cytokines, molecules secreted by immune cells. He had 33 mania patients who'd previously been hospitalized take a probiotic prophylactically over 24 weeks. Patients who took the probiotic along with their usual medications were 75% less likely to be admitted to the hospital for manic attacks compared with patients who didn't. The study is preliminary, but it suggests that targeting immune function may improve mental health outcomes, and that tinkering with the microbe might be a practical, cost-effective way to do this. Watershed moments occasionally come along in medical history when previously intractable or even deadly conditions suddenly become treatable or preventable. They are sometimes accompanied by a shift in how scientists understand the disorders in question. We now seem to have reached such a threshold certain rare autoimmune diseases of the brain. Not long ago, they could be a death sentence or warrant institutionalization. Now, with aggressive treatment treated at the immune system, patients can recover. Does this group encompass a larger chunk of physiatric disorders? No one knows the answer yet, but it's an exciting time to watch the question play out. Moses Velasquez Manoff, the author of An Epidemic of Absence, A New Way of Understanding Allergies and Autoimmune Diseases, and editor of Bay Nature magazine, is a contributing opinion writer. Follow the New York Times opinion section on Facebook and Twitter at NYT Opinion, I guess New York Times Opinion, and sign up for the Opinion Today newsletter. A version of this article appears in print on September 30th, 2018 on page SR7 of the New York edition with the headline, When Cancer Meets Schizophrenia. Order reprints today's print. Subscribe. I'll post that to Twitter. It's a good, interesting article.